All right, so covered a lot of topics so far. This week I want to talk about the church hierarchy and structure, specifically focusing on the people that you may see floating around our services, and their different roles. As is often the case, I don't necessarily expect you to remember every single thing on this sheet of paper, but it's a reference, a guide, something for you to maybe hold on to, and if you know a bishop is coming, for example, you can refresh yourself a little bit on some of this. So we'll start at the top, which for us is the bishop. This, of course, is a little different than other parts of the Christian world. That means that the sole authority within a given diocese is the bishop presiding over that diocese. No one else can tell him to do anything within his own diocese. There's no one over him, so to speak. If you are a little bit familiar with church structure, you may be aware of a concept of the Patriarch of Moscow, or the Ecumenical Patriarch, or our own Metropolitan Tikhon. They serve in a role that is more like the Speaker of the House. When it comes to administrative things, they might call a vote. They might make sure that everyone gets together to talk about an issue that needs to be talked about. But when it comes down to actually voting, they have the same singular vote as everyone else, at least at the level of bishops anyway. And therefore, within his own diocese, which for our Metropolitan Tikhon is Washington, D.C., and some surrounding area, that's his diocese, and the churches there are solely under his authority and no one else's. We don't have anyone with no territory, or universal territory. Everyone has a diocese. Every bishop has a diocese, and in that diocese, the buck stops with him. As we say in the liturgy, he rightly divides the word of God's truth, and without his blessing, nothing can happen. So, to be very clear, that means that I am serving here at the bishop's discretion. If I do something bad, the bishop will be the one to step in to say, you are no longer blessed to serve. If there's a problem in the parish, he may step in and dissolve the parish council, for example, and take control himself directly of a parish for a time anyway. Obviously, there's far too many parishes for him to do that with all of them. But if there's a particular need, he could come in and take control, because this is ultimately his parish, not ours, not mine, the bishop's parish. He decides what happens here. He decides who serves here and who doesn't. And again, to be very, very, very clear, should another bishop come, a bishop who I don't know, who is not our bishop, Bishop Vasily, I would tell him, no, you cannot serve, unless he has the blessing of our bishop to serve. Bishop or no, though he does outrank me, and I would certainly start by asking his blessing. I would immediately have to tell him, I'm sorry, without the blessing of our bishop, you cannot serve here. Because again, within the diocese of a given bishop, that bishop is the sole and ultimate authority, excepting, of course, God. Bishops in a given area get together and form councils or synods. You'll hear both of those words. These are usually standing in some form or another. So there's a synod in the Orthodox Church in America. They meet regularly, and all of the bishops from Canada through Mexico and everywhere in between talk about whatever things need to be talked about in their various dioceses and come to decisions and make sure that they're kind of doing roughly the same thing together. Of course, outside of the OCA, there are other jurisdictions here in North America, which I won't go into too much of a description of why that is here, but suffice it to say that we're a land of immigrants, and immigrants often bring their own clergy with them. And so that's why we have Rokor, Antiochian, Greek, Serbian, Bulgarian, all sorts from all over the world. These bishops are the same. Within their own jurisdiction, within their own synod, within their own diocese, they are the sole authority. When a bishop acts out of line, then, it is his neighboring brother bishops that are to keep him in line. because he is the only authority within his diocese. So there's again, I won't give you all the details, but there's basically a little church court that will take place, and bishops, because we're talking about a bishop here, bishops will be the jury, and they will stand and make a decision about whatever needs to happen. If that should mean ultimately defrocking, meaning making him not a bishop anymore, or in some other way reprimanding him, or even deciding he's innocent and letting him go. It just depends on whatever they decide. You will often hear bishops referred to in person with various ethnic words, in part because English doesn't really have a diminutive form. For those of you that speak other languages, you may be aware of the fact that you can refer to people in what is sometimes officially called a diminutive, a loving way of saying a word that otherwise doesn't have that meaning. So we would use words like vladika, which is the Slavonic, the Russian, sayedna, which is Arabic, or despots, which is despota, which is the Greek. In English, we liturgically refer to bishops as master. So you will hear, when a bishop is serving, the deacon will intone Master Bless at the beginning of liturgy, and he'll give the blessing to start the service. And anytime you walk up to get a blessing, you would say, Master Bless, and he would give you a blessing. I say the same thing. If you're writing a letter, email, that kind of thing, you'd say Your Grace or Eminence, depending on bishop or archbishop. And like I said here, Metropolitan, Archbishop, although we don't have them here in North America, Patriarch, they're all just bishops. They're fancy words for bishops, but they're just bishops at the end of the day. So all of everything I've said here would apply to them equally. We've already talked about that. So it is pretty much always appropriate to approach a bishop and ask for blessing. Like I said, you can use the diminutive in the other language if you like, or just use English because that's what we all speak here. And the last thing to note is that for us, a bishop cannot be married. The reason for this is not because marriage is somehow bad. In fact, if we look through history, if you go far enough back, bishops were often married. The reason that we don't allow bishops to be married in modern times is because our dioceses are quite large. Does anyone know how big the Diocese of the West, the one that this parish is a part of, how big that diocese is? It's California up through Washington and all the way over to Colorado. It's a big area. It's a lot of churches. So, how can you possibly be anywhere near engaged with all of those parishes and also be a good husband and a good father to your children? And the answer the church decided is, you can't. So, we don't allow our bishops to be married. I will say, though, bishops can have been married. So it is not unheard of for a priest, for example, who is married, whose wife dies in an accident or, cancer, whatever it may be, health issue, to, at some point down the line, maybe be at some point ordained. That is then a bishop that may be wearing a wedding ring because he's married in the church, but does not actually have a spouse who he's taking care of. Does that make sense? There are a few historical references to clergymen and their wives deciding to both enter monasteries simultaneously. And then that would be the only time when one could have a living spouse that would allow you to also be a bishop. But as far as I'm aware, that hasn't happened for a long time. That would be very uncommon in today's world. All right, questions about bishops? All right. Oh, yeah, go for it.
How are bishops, I guess how is I know it's a layman up on hands, but is there multiple bishops that come together?
Yes. Yes, the ordination of a bishop requires multiple bishops to do it. You can look back pretty recently. Our previous Archbishop Benjamin, who had been bishop here for many, many years, retired, and we had our new Bishop Vasily ordained and installed as bishop. That was not that long ago. You can find the recording of that on YouTube if you want to watch the service. It was streamed. I think it's on YouTube, Facebook, something like that. So if you're curious, you can go watch that service. Or you can find it, I'm sure, plenty of other places as well. But yeah. Sure.
Is there a set number of bishops that we have?
Nope. As many as we need. Yep.
What are some of the qualifications to become, like, to serve a certain amount of years?
Yes, so with all of these, there are age requirements. A bishop should be 50 years old, at least. In reasonable health, that includes things like you have to have your limbs because you have to be serving services and whatnot, and you can't really do that if you're missing an arm or something like that. Nothing against people with disabilities, just practically speaking, not really able to do the job. So, and then in the OCA here, this is not universally true, but in the OCA, we require priests and, by extension, bishops to have a seminary degree, which is a master's program. Usually, someone who is being selected for a bishop would have higher education than that even, sometimes multiple degrees from different institutions, but they're usually, I shouldn't say usually, they're often considered very well regarded in some particular area. So our bishop put a lot of time and effort in his academic years into the way that we serve liturgy. So he's one of the co-authors of the modern translations of our liturgy books. Not everyone is necessarily that, but oftentimes being well-educated people that have been in the church for a long time, they're involved in different things like that. Yes?
When you say they have to have a degree from a seminary, is
Mhm.
it like a generic Christian seminary?
No.
Or do they have a special Orthodox related to?
That one.
Okay.
The OCA operates 3 seminaries in North America, 2 on the East Coast and 1 in Alaska. There are a handful of others from the other jurisdictions as well, but yeah. If you had a generic seminary degree of some kind, we would require you to get a certificate from one of the seminaries going to a shorter program, but yeah. Good questions. Anything else for bishops? Great. Can circle back if you think of any too. All right, priests. So like I said before, a priest serves in the place of a bishop and only with his blessing. Where there's a cloth, you may recall when we did the tour here, on the altar, I showed you there were a bunch of things, but one of them was the gospel. Underneath the gospel, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a folded up cloth. That cloth is called the antimons, it's a Greek word, and that cloth has the signature of the bishop, and that is what indicates that I have his blessing to serve here. If something were to happen, he would take that back, and now I could not serve here. So whether we are doing the liturgy here, or if we're going to a children's camp in some summer camp, way out in the woods or something, we'd bring the antimons and serve liturgy on that, wherever we are. We don't usually do liturgies outside, but every once in a while, and they'd be done, like I said, always on the antimons. The antimons has, as well as the bishop's signature, it always has a relic of a saint in it. So we're always serving liturgy on relics of saints, which if you look at some of the very earliest Christian writings, that was the norm as well, to take up the relics of the martyrs and to serve liturgy on the relics of the martyrs. A bishop can serve all of the sacraments, hopefully, obviously. The priest can serve all of them except 2. The one is the confecting, it's a little kind of fancy word, but confecting of chrism. You are most aware of that because when we bring people into the church, we baptize them and we chrismate them. Chrismating happens with chrism. Chrism is a very fancy oil with a lot of spices, and it's made over the course of basically the entirety of Lent. And the actual final putting together of everything takes place through Holy Week. So it's a long process. That is how we make the distinction. You may, if you are aware, in the Catholic world, part of the reason that confirmation happens later is because they interpret things to say that a bishop is the only one that can do chrismation, and so since bishops can't be everywhere all the time, they often happen later. In our church, we say that can only happen by a bishop, and he gives his blessing for that to happen by the chrism, that he and only he can make in connection with all of the bishops on the synod. So all the bishops from the OC get together every 3 years and make a big old vat of chrism to be distributed over the church for the next few years. The other one is the ordination of other clergy. I'm not allowed to do that either. If a priest acts out of line, there's a similar kind of court, which is the jury then would be priests, and the judge would be the presiding bishop of the diocese. Otherwise, it works pretty much the same as the bishop. You can refer to priests as priest or father. Sometimes people coming from Protestant backgrounds have personal struggles with calling people father. That's okay. You call a doctor, and an officer, so you can call a priest. It's totally fine to just say priest so-and-so. You say bishop so-and-so, you can say priest so-and-so. It recognizes the position without necessarily using words that some people struggle with. The reason we use that is because theoretically, a good priest should be spiritually guiding the flock, like a dad, like a father. So that is maybe as close to a diminutive as we get in English. It is nearly always appropriate to ask a priest's blessing. The one time it is not is when a bishop is present, and that's done by saying Father bless, and you'll see people will take their hands, just like for a bishop, put right over left, and say Father bless. Sometimes people will also do a bow. You don't have to do that. Different cultures around the world have different practices, but the barest minimum is right over left and asking for the blessing. Again, whether that's Master bless for a bishop or Father bless for a priest. Again, though, unless a bishop is present, and then you ask him. Priests can be married. I think you probably all know that, given that I have a wife and children. But I cannot get married. Does that distinction make sense? So if a priest is ordained, either with a wife who then dies, or having not been married, he cannot later get married. The reason for that being the same reason that it's not generally considered very cool for, like, a doctor to marry their patient. There's a dynamic there that makes that kind of weird and awkward. If, however, the priest is married, the wife is usually called by another ethnic title. Matушka is the Greek, the Russian word for like little mother. Presbytera in Greek literally just means female priest. Which comes from an understanding in our form of marriage anyway, that the two become one flesh. So when the husband is ordained, in a sense, the wife is as well. So presbyter for the priest, presbytera for the priest's wife. Pani is a form, it's mostly used in the Carpathian background, so Ukraine, Romania, that kind of area. It's short for Pani Matka, which also means little mother. Questions about priests? Same thing, like I said before, seminary degree, 30 years of age for priesthood. Yeah, other questions?
Sorry, can I back up real quick?
Sure.
This diocese is called what in the OC?
The Diocese of the West.
We have one bishop?
Yes. All right. Well, then we'll move on to deacon. Oh, yes.
Does each diocese only have one, or is that?
One bishop?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Sometimes there will be what's called an auxiliary bishop, whose formal diocese will be a particular city, but who administratively assists in the larger diocese. So I think it was LA for a little while had an auxiliary for our diocese. That would mean that the Diocese of the West was everything except LA, and then LA had their own bishop, but practically he assisted with the Diocese of the West.
Is there like any issues with that? Like, because there's so many jurisdictions?
I'm not sure I follow the question.
Like, does it lead to any kind of division?
Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, everyone's very aware of the fact that we are under our bishop. The bishops try and make visits to the parishes at least once a year, usually for the parish feast day, if possible, sometimes other days as well. I don't know the statistics for our new bishop, but I know that our previous bishop was the best traveled of all the bishops, spending the most days of any given year on the road visiting all the parishes throughout the diocese. So, yeah.
How many parishes
In the Diocese of the West? You can find that information on the diocese website, although it's not, I think, a single number, but you could count the number of items on the list or something like that. Off the top of my head, I'm not totally certain. I want to say around 100 maybe, but don't quote me on that. I could be off.
I'm kind of confused. So the Bishop of the West is the Bishop of the OCA?
No. So the thing to remember is that we are not like the Catholic Church. We do not have one person that presides over all of anything. If you are at all familiar with the modern form of, this might sound a little silly, but federated services, I don't know if that means anything to any of you, but you are in Silicon Valley, so maybe there's a high percentage chance. No? Okay. The basic idea, or sort of one of the founding ideas sort of the United States, right? You have a bunch of states that do their own thing. We just don't have a federal level. We don't have a federal government over top. Each state does their own thing, and that's pretty much it. So the bishop then in that scenario would be like the governor of any given state. But there's no one above. So when the bishop of this diocese says that we do something, that's what we do. The metropolitan, which is maybe what you're thinking of, Tikhon, he sits in a purely administrative, not liturgical role. Meaning, like I said, he within his own diocese is everything I just said. But he has been selected, that diocese given a place of honor, so that he can call meetings for all of the other bishops to come to. And he can request that certain things be discussed or voted on. But when it comes down to voting, he has one vote just like all the other bishops. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the idea, was that pentarchy, was that like an early Christianity that like prior to the schism then, where there was like these five, what they call patriarchs?
Mm-hmm. Rome was one of them.
That were, like presided over bishops, or?
No. Like I said, patriarch is the same as what we call metropolitan. A patriarch is just a bishop. He has a diocese that he is in charge of, and no one else is in charge of. But he can call meetings and ask people to vote on things. They just get a slightly different fancy name, but they're just a bishop. Yes.
Is it common or uncommon for like a average parishioner of, say, this diocese, who was traveling to visit their friend in some other diocese, and they went to their parish, and then they were doing something and say, wow, your bishop does that? I can hardly believe it.
No. There are differences sometimes, but in modern times with the internet, that doesn't really happen anymore. You might know the phrase, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. That is quite literally a quote from a parishioner visiting the Romans and writing back to his bishop saying, hey, they do fasting differently here. What am I supposed to do? And the bishop saying, when in Rome, do what the Romans do. So you might run into some minor variations. The bishop prefers this thing or prefers that thing, but you're never going to walk in and see something wildly different. If you did, then the surrounding bishops would step in and say, hey, buddy, what you doing? That's weird. Why are you doing that? And he'd have to answer.
So, like by my house is a Romanian Orthodox Church. I'm assuming they're not part of the OCA.
They probably are. The OCA is the only one that has made every effort to be as inclusive as possible. So the Bulgarian monastery just north of here is part of the OCA. Not all, but most of my understanding, anyway, most of the Romanian parishes are part of the OCA, and Albanian, although there's not very many of them out here, but on the east coast, more Albanian parishes, also part of the OCA. I might be forgetting more, but
But it is possible for there to be Orthodox Church in the West that's not under the...
yes, Rokor, Antiochian Greek, yep.
Are there any parts of the world that are not part of any diocese, like say Hawaii, maybe there's one or two Orthodox people, but there's no bishop for thousands of miles?
Hawaii is part of the Diocese of the West, so
Is part of what?
the Diocese of the West. So our bishop here has Hawaii as well.
So there's no island or country or...
Should such a thing arise, usually jurisdiction would fall to the ecumenical patriarch.
I'm sorry?
The ecumenical patriarch, out of what used to be called Constantinople, but is now Istanbul, is given sort of jurisdiction over everyone that doesn't otherwise have jurisdiction. But for example, so that would have applied to North America until the Russians sent missionaries over and they started their churches here, which eventually spread to all of everything, and that's now what the OCA is. At that point in time, once someone made official contact and did their own things there, then it's, you know, whoever the first bishops there are the first ones there. But given, should there be a situation ever where there is someone truly without a bishop, he would be under the ecumenical patriarch. Does that all make sense? Yeah. I promise you that this doesn't really come into effect in everyday life. Those of you that have been coming here for a little while probably have noticed that other than saying the name of the bishop in the services and having his picture in our room over there, it doesn't really affect much. Even when we changed bishops here recently, because the previous one, due to health reasons, had to retire, there were not sweeping changes that came in with the new person as bishop. The way that we do services has remained largely the same for quite a while. So again, while there may be some minor preferences from a bishop about doing things this way or that way, or don't skip that thing, or it's okay if you skip that thing, you're never really going to walk into an Orthodox church and just be like, wow, what was that? The singing might be different, the iconography might look a little different, the way the vestments are tailored might be a little bit different or something like that, but the actual day-to-day, services and liturgies that are done and celebrations of feasts and fasts and all that, it's going to be more or less the same. All right, moving on. Feel free to ask more if there's more. All right, deacons. I think this is probably, other than the minor ranks that no one's ever heard of, probably the most misunderstood rank coming from Protestant world, if you have any understanding of what a deacon is at all. For us, a deacon serves purely as an assistant. So if you look in, I'm pretty sure it's Acts, where they describe the apostles are struggling to manage all of the things they need to do, and so they decide to set aside some upstanding men to be deacons to assist. So the deacon's role is to assist. Both liturgically, so you'll see in services, they vest and they have things they do, they say some of the petitions, which is very nice. It gives me room to say my prayers without racing through them like I have to do now. And in the various ministries of the church. So in parishes that have deacons, it's not uncommon to have them be in control of the choir or in control of some various charities or other things within the various ministries of the parish. They can help with preaching, usually, and teaching. So you might have a deacon that runs the Sunday school program or the catechesis classes, like what we're doing right now. However, they can do none of those things without the blessing of the priest or bishop. A deacon is not allowed under any circumstances ever, except when lay people are, to serve a service by himself. That one exception being baptisms in the case of an emergency if the infant is going to die before a priest can come. Any layperson can baptize, and that would include a deacon. But if you're at all aware, again, of certain other practices outside where a deacon, for example, could do a marriage, that is not our case. A deacon can do no service of any kind by themselves without a priest present. Make sense? Good. We refer to them as deacon or father. Sometimes you'll hear people say father deacon. It's really weird. You don't say father priest or master bishop, so I don't know why you'd say father deacon. Just say father or deacon. It's fine. If married, they get the same title in the Russian world. Just like we'd call them father, we'd call the wife mother, except we use the diminutive foreign word, so matishka or pani. However, in Greek, they call her literally female deacon, diakonissa, for the same reason as a priest is presbytera. You do not ever ask a deacon's blessing. Only priests and bishops give blessings. You may run into, there are some practices where people will still kiss the deacon's hand. That's weird. Don't do that. Does that make sense?
Is there a way to distinguish the deacon from the vessel?
Yes. So, sorry, I haven't been doing this very well, but if we look at the back, I tried to give you some pictures. Both of what you might expect one to wear every day and what they might wear in services. And you might recognize a few of the faces here anyway. So you can see for bishops, they will always have a staff. You'll see that it's the same in Western bishops as well, having a crozier or something they call it. It's usually more the iconic shepherd's crook kind of shape. Ours aren't usually that shape, but a staff nevertheless. And instead of wearing a cross, they wear a little icon. Usually it's an icon of the Theotokos. There are some exceptions. And in the services themselves, they wear a really fancy hat called a mitre, which you can see in the picture there. Priests then often wear hats, not always, but never usually quite as fancy. Priests will always wear crosses, never icons. So if someone has a little square icon, that's a bishop. If they have a cross, they're a priest. If they have nothing around their neck, but they look otherwise the same, then they are a deacon. Now I say all of that, and unfortunately it's not universally true, because there are some jurisdictions where wearing a cross is an award that is given later. As much as I believe in the Serbian diocese, a priest is only allowed to wear a cross outside of services after 25 years. That's by far the longest, to my knowledge. It is said that in the Russian Slavic world, one of the czars got frustrated because he couldn't tell the difference between a priest and a deacon and asked a blessing of a deacon, and the deacon said, "I'm a deacon, I can't do that." And the czar went, "Well, how the heck was I supposed to know that?" And so he made all the priests wear crosses, and we've inherited that. I'm not sure if that's true or not. I don't know that it really matters, but today we wear crosses in the Slavic world. In the Byzantine world, who knows? You can see the liturgical vestments are pretty different. So you probably know the priest ones pretty well because that's what I wear all the time. The deacons ones look more like the altar servers that you see here, except they have a cloth over their shoulder. If you look at either St. Stephen or St. Lawrence on either side in the front, those are deacons, and you can see they have a red cloth going over the one shoulder, a little strip of cloth. That is the iconic piece of a deacon's liturgical vestments. It's called an orarium.
Who's the first deacons that were ordained?
Oh, you're talking about the 12 deacons that were set aside?
Yeah.
I don't remember all their names off the top of my head. I think Sosipater was one of them. And that's the only name that's coming to me right in this very second. But you can look it up. I have an icon of one of them, but I cannot for the life of me think of his name either right now. Anyway, you can look up the names of them. It is known. All right. So those three, I think, are the ones you have the best chance of having had any knowledge of previously. The next ones, I suspect, probably not at all. Subdeacons wear the same cloth that I just pointed out the deacons wear, but instead of wearing it draped over shoulder, it's crossed. So I apologize, I could not find a very good picture of it, but if you really squint and look at that tiny little picture of the subdeacons on the right in the green, you can kind of tell that they are wearing a piece of cloth over both shoulders crossed in the front. That's how you know someone is a subdeacon. They are given what is sometimes called a slightly lesser form of ordination. So they are allowed to do a handful of things that the other rank, like touching the altar table, which is otherwise only higher ranking clergy can do. But they're usually considered part of the minor orders, and their wife is given no special title. I believe to be, so we said priest is 30, deacon is 25, subdeacon is 20 years of age. Officially, their job is to assist the bishop, especially in vesting, which is a whole thing. You'll see when we have one. We'll have a bishop here for Palm Sunday, so pay attention to what happens then, and you'll see how that goes. If you're being very pedantic, technically speaking, once married, a subdeacon is also not allowed to get married. In practice, being part of the minor orders, sometimes bishops will allow subdeacons to get married. However, with readers, there is no restriction on marriage. The reader is the lowest rank, so the other people we have here on a regular basis that you might see wearing robes, other than me and Father George, are all readers. The minor ranks don't wear this outer piece, this flowy piece. They only wear the inner cassock, whose sleeves are just normal sleeves. Well, maybe got buttons or whatever, but generally speaking, they're not the long, flowy things like the major ranks of clergy wear. Both subdeacons and readers. A reader should be someone who knows how to put the services together, knows how to sing. They may be in charge of the choir or assigning all the various scripture readings that we do, and in general, just ensuring good and proper order to our services. Again, we call the person, the reader, and the wife, if there is one, no particular title. And again, they can both be and get married. Does that make sense?
Do you use the term lay member?
Yes. We'll talk about them in a minute.
Okay.
I do want to call out historically, there were some other ranks of clergy. Bell ringers, door greeters, even choir singers were ranked among the clergy, in large part because they did sort of what you could think of as like outward-facing actions in the church. So anyone walking in is going to hear the choir singing. Anyone walking anywhere near the church is going to hear the bell ringing. Anyone coming in is going to be greeted by someone at the door. So those were historically considered actual ranks of clergy. In modern days, in large part because of the various persecutions under the Ottomans, under the communists, a lot of that liturgical vibrancy has faded a little bit. We know of them, it's not that common. There have been a handful of instances of bell ringers being brought back as a more common rank. So there's a few of them, I believe, in this diocese, but not very common these days. And then the last one is the deaconess, which you may be aware of. Phoebe is one of the more famous ones. There were a few that are well known. No one argues about the existence of deaconesses, and no one argues about their assistance in the ministry. So, for example, in Roman times, when a woman was widowed, not having a man around meant that she could not be with other men alone. And so that would make things like catechizing and even baptisms, which were at the time done fully in the nude, impossible to happen with another man. So the deaconess would be the one that was socially allowed to go into the residence of women that were either not married or formerly married in some form or fashion, and could catechize them, do at least the dunking part of the baptism, although the chrismation and subsequent tonsure or whatnot would still happen by the priest. But some people today try and claim that deaconesses served a liturgical role. We have no evidence of that, beyond a very minimal role of simply standing at the front, which you still see today. Our deacons will come out and stand in front and show you all when to cross yourselves. So if you ever see a deacon come in and he's crossing himself, do it, because he's showing you when to do it. He will also show you when to do prostrations. If there are to be prostrations done that day, he will do them out here, so do them. But then he'll go back in and do other things inside. So there's some different practices through time, but at least at one point in time it was common to have men on one side, women on the other, and then a deacon and deaconess standing basically at the front-ish of the church through the whole service, emulating for everyone what to do, when to sit, when to stand, when to cross themselves, when to do prostrations, all that kind of stuff. To call that fully a liturgical role is not wrong per se, but it isn't the same as what deacons do today. Deacons today have taken on a much greater liturgical role than they did in the past, going into the altar and assisting at the table itself, which, again, was not what deaconesses ever did. Does that make sense? So we know it's a thing. In fact, deaconesses, some people try and claim that they died out a long time ago. That is not true. Deaconesses have actually never fully disappeared from the church. They are not common today, but neither are deacons. We don't have a deacon here. Deaconesses are less common, but there's records, for example, of when Russia sent missionaries to Japan. Among those listed as being sent is a deaconess. They sent a deaconess to Japan to help with the catechesis there. The church in Alexandria, so through Africa, has continued the setting aside of deaconesses. So it has never truly gone away in the church. It's just become very uncommon. So lest don't even try and tell you that they're not a thing anymore, and they haven't been for a long time. They're wrong. And they largely do the same role they always have, which is assisting in the various ministries of the church. Does that make sense? I don't know if you've run into anyone online that's gotten all uppity about that, but there are those that like to do that. They're usually wrong. It's the unfortunate thing about the internet is you have a platform and no one to rein you in. So.
Can I ask the folks that assist in the back?
Sure.
What is are they readers?
No. So a reader will still wear this inner, what's called the inner cassock. Our altar servers, with the exception of one who is a reader, do not. They.
That's their title is altar server.
We don't. We call them altar servers. We don't really give them a title.
Oh, they're not working.
Correct. Yep.
Is the reader the one that reads the epistles? That can be sort of anybody?
So, again, because of the various eras of persecution in the church, such things have been shuffled around a little bit, but historically, readers were not only the ones that did those, they were also the ones that kept those books, so they weren't here at the church. In case there was a raid by the government and those books were outlawed, they would find nothing. They were brought by the readers, the ones who both knew how to read and knew how to put the services together, and would then do those readings at the appropriate times. In modern times, literacy is pretty normal, pretty common. And we don't really have authorities raiding our parishes, at least not here. Glory to God. So a lot of that part of being a reader has since gone away. But yes, generally speaking, they will do the Old Testament readings. They'll do the epistle if there's not a deacon to do them. They may be the ones announcing, reading psalms or other things during the services. Yeah, or singing in the choir, or other roles sometimes as well. But
And that could be either a man or a woman?
yes, in practice, usually only a man. But it is not unheard of for there to be women that are tonsured readers. The reason for that is that in modern days we usually combine a few things into readers. And because we do that, one of those is the first rank of the priesthood, which would limit it to men only. If you don't do that, which is more common in the Byzantine world, Greek, Antiochian, Romanian, etc., then there's no reason that you couldn't have women tonsured readers, and they do. Usually in that world, you'll see their readers wear only the outer cassock. So you may run into people wearing what looks exactly like the outer robe I'm wearing, but instead of another robe underneath, it's just church clothes. That's usually going to be a Byzantine reader of some rank. Yeah. Other questions about that? All right. So on to lay persons, men and women. This just describes anyone who isn't set aside for any particular role. That doesn't mean that there isn't plenty of work to do. So as you may be aware, we just, a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, whenever that was, did a baking class here because we use a lot of bread. There's, robes and vestments and things that need to be made. There's the church in general to be maintained. So there's all sorts of people, men and women, that do lots of work in the church but aren't clergy. Just because you're not given some liturgical role doesn't mean there isn't plenty to do. Does that answer your question? There's not a whole lot to say about that, but I don't know if you had a specific question.
No.
Okay. All right. The last one to talk about then before we're done is monastics. Again, if you are familiar with, I think, generally speaking, the Catholic Church is the only one that really does much for monastics these days, but they are often clergy. In our world, monastics are usually not clergy. So that word layperson can describe a lay monastic or a lay non-monastic, just someone who is not clergy. They can be clergy. So if any of you have gone to the monastery just north of here, Holy Cross in Castro Valley, the abbot, Father Stephen, is a priest and a monastic. But the other monks there are monastics, but not clergy of any kind. Does that make sense? Yes.
That's a higher monk?
A higher monk is one who is clergy and a monk. Yes. We don't usually use the word nun to describe a woman monastic. So we will say a female monastery. We don't basically ever say nunnery. In part because that sounds like a place where you churn out nuns, which is kind of a silly thing. But you are not producing them, so to speak. It's not a product. When we say monastery, there is no gender connotation with that. It can be a men's monastery or a women's monastery. Their job is to pray for the salvation of the world. They don't have, office jobs or whatever usually, so they do all of the services. We talked last week about all the different services. They would do pretty much all of those all the time. So those of you who remember, we said there's like 3 to 4 hours between every service through the entire day. Monastics actually do that. It depends a little bit on the monastery and if they have other jobs or if they have the people to do them. So Holy Cross, for example, just north of here, doesn't have that many monks, and it's hard to do the full liturgical cycle when you don't have very many people to do it. But larger monasteries certainly do at least get pretty close to doing that, and they certainly hold at least, no matter what, hold at least some kind of service every day, usually morning and evening, if nothing else. We don't have different varieties of monastics, so if you've heard, again, of the Catholic world of Franciscans or Jesuits or I don't even know what all there are, but those are at least some of the popular ones. They live different lives. They do different things. We don't have that. A monk is a monk, male or female, they do the same thing. There's, of course, going to be some minor variation from monastery to monastery. Some specialize in making wine. Some specialize in making candles. Some specialize in making icons. Some specialize in being attached to a seminary and training future clergy. They usually, although not always, have something that they do, and that will, depending on what it is, change the life of the monastery. But they are all more or less doing the same thing. We call monks, even whether if they're ordained or not, mother or father. So any monk ever will be, any male monk will be father whomever, any nun, any female monastic will be mother whomever. And if you ever do have an opportunity to go to a women's monastery, you would ask a blessing of the abbess just like you would from a priest or bishop. Mother bless. Does that all make sense? It's a lot of information covering a pretty wide area there. So there are ranks to monasticism. There's some minor variation between Byzantine and Slavic, but generally speaking, there's what's sometimes called a rheosophore, meaning you've been given the thing to wear. That's kind of equivalent-ish to a novice. We don't really use that word. We don't use that word. And then there is what is just basically a monk. You've been fully tonsured a monastic, and then if you've done that for a long time, excelled at it, whatever, different places have different requirements for it, you can be given the schema. What that entails, again, varies wildly from place to place, but yeah, it's just a rank of monastic.
Do people typically commit the rest of their life when they become?
Yes. Not typically, always. Just like ordination, well, no, I shouldn't say that. Ordination can be undone for us. Monastic tonsure cannot. So you don't do that lightly. So it's very common. Pretty much every monastery ever will have some cohort of people that are spending anywhere from maybe a few years to a few decades deciding if this is what they want to do. It's pretty normal. Yes?
The Holy Cross Monastery, are we allowed to visit?
Yeah, reach out to them. Yep. They enjoy having visitors, so contact them and they'll let you know how to do that. But yeah, by all means. It's Castro Valley, so it's not super far. Well, it's kind of out in the hills, but still.
Is that the monastery, is that your monastery up there on, I can't remember the name of the road?
Yes, that's the one technically in Castro Valley. Holy Cross.
Oh, I wasn't referring to that one. There's another monastery on, tip of my tongue, right off the 84 in Niles Canyon Road.
Yeah.
That is?
It's technically Castro Valley. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, sure doesn't feel like Castro Valley, but apparently, administratively, that is technically Castro Valley. So.
I remember seeing that if
Yeah.
you want to go there, then women have to wear a nice dress and the guys
Yeah.
have to wear
Shoulders covered, knees covered.
be nice.
Yep. That's pretty universal. Pretty much every monastery will say that. Dress modestly.
Palomares Road, that's what I was thinking of.
Yes. Yep, that's Holy Cross Monastery.
Oh.
Yeah.
How does one become a deacon?
Sure. Well, so all of these ranks are sequential. So to be a bishop, one must have been a priest. To be a priest, one must have been a deacon. So you would start by being tonsured a reader. That happens before liturgy. You reach out to, I won't give you the full process, but the kind of broad strokes is you have to talk to the bishop, usually through administrative people in the diocese, and they'll ask for the blessing of your parish priest, who presumably knows you a lot better than the bishop would be able to. And you have to give some references, do a background check, that kind of thing. And if that all passes and you are otherwise a good candidate for it, then whenever the bishop comes, the tonsuring, the ordination for readers and subdeacons happens before liturgy fully starts, in between hours and liturgy. Once that's been done, usually, and you've done it for some amount of time, although not always, you can take, usually, so if you don't get a seminary degree to be a deacon, you have to do a multi-year program. So it ends up being, you don't have to go anywhere necessarily, you just take a bunch of online classes, but you still have to go through a somewhat intensive process. After you've done that, and you've done a bunch of liturgical practice to know where to stand and when and what to say and what to hold and what not to hold and that kind of thing, and you've successfully passed all those classes and everything, and your priest signs off saying you're in good standing and otherwise a good candidate, then you can be ordained to the diaconate, and the same general thing applies for priesthood and bishop.
And then once you go through all that and you're in, if you decide to go to another church, are you able to do it there too, or just in?
Yes. So the way that moving around as clergy works is you have to both ask your own bishop for a blessing to not be at the parish that you're supposed to be at, and ask the bishop of the church you're going to be at that parish. If it's in the same diocese, that makes it a little easier. If I were to go to the East Coast or something, then I'd have to email our Bishop Vasily and Archbishop Michael or Mark or someone, whoever it is out there and wherever I'm going, and get their blessing to serve at whatever parish I'm going to. It's pretty uncommon to not be giving the blessing to do so, assuming there's good reason for you to do that. Certainly can happen, but it's pretty uncommon. Again, assuming you have good reason and give people enough lead time and that kind of thing. But yeah, I can't really think of a reason why you would ever not be allowed to. So
Is there a reason why, during the services, so you have like Vincent and like, you know, the men, and you got the like the young, you know, pretty much the boys serving, does that represent anything, or is that just?
trying to keep them from meandering off and getting bored and doing other things. Yeah. There are stories of wrong name, St. John of San Francisco had girls serving in the altar with him as well as boys. So technically speaking, there is no, sometimes people think that only men can go on the altar. That is not true. Go to a women's monastery and you'll see plenty of women in an altar space. But in common practice, it doesn't happen very often. And again, my own personal opinion on this is that it probably has more to do with historical cultural norms and the persecution under Ottomans and communists that muted some of the liturgical vibrancy that I've talked about before. So, but no, it's basically just whomever wants to and is more or less capable of standing through a service without exploding like some little kids do. Yeah.
When I was here on Sunday, and I saw this really nice procession and the
Yeah.
communion stuff, and there were some young teenagers, I think they were maybe 12 or 13, that were wearing real nice vestments, and one of them brought me communion. But where do they fall on this list? Are they on this list, or are they completely?
So just to be very clear here, communion is only from the chalice and will only ever be given from the hand of a priest or in some cases a deacon. So if you're given, communion is given to you on a spoon from the chalice and only by the hand of a priest or sometimes a deacon. So if someone is handing you something in a service, it's not communion, it's blessed bread, but we only give communion to prepared Orthodox Christians, which I want to be very clear means not all Orthodox Christians, only those that are currently in good standing, have gone to confession recently and have done all the appropriate prayers and all that good stuff. What you were describing, people wearing vestments and doing things, are what we call altar servers, or sometimes you'll hear the word acolyte. They're just helpers. They aren't any of these particular ranks.
Did he make a mistake by giving me
Nope.
this?
No. Nope. Yep, that's open for anyone. Yep. That blessed bread, practically speaking, is there to wash out your mouth after you take communion. So it is a nice thing to share with people.
Does that mean that I did not receive communion?
Correct.
I see.
You might raise some eyebrows if you were to say that other places.
So is that water that people drink too?
Wine.
Oh, it's wine, okay.
50-50, wine and water, but yeah.
Oh, I see.
It's warmed up, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, did you say that young guy was not on this list?
Correct. They're not a rank of clergy. The altar servers, with rare exception, are not a rank of clergy. They're just people that are volunteering to help. So we have them wear something nice, one, because it reminds them that they're doing a job and they're not just hanging out back there. 2, because for everyone else, it's nice to have some consistency and not have a bunch of random logos or whatever. But yeah.
And you probably mentioned this, but I couldn't hear everything. But
Sure.
the music director
Mm-hmm.
and the choir ladies, they are where on the list?
Historically, I mentioned choir singers were a rank of clergy. In modern days, we don't really do that anymore. Sometimes, if you see someone wearing a robe, like this one, the inside one, waving their arms around, they're probably a reader, sometimes subdeacon, leading the choir. But for us, we have 2 readers that regularly sing in the choir. One of them, well, both of them, sometimes direct. But our usual choir director and the rest of our choir singers are not clergy, they're just volunteers that are helping. Yeah, good question though. I have no idea how we're doing for time. We are at time. But if you've got more questions, that's okay. I didn't give you any heads up, so. Are there any final questions here about any of this? It's a lot, I know. There's no possible way we could cover everything in this class. Sure.
You mentioned the ecumenical
Patriarch.
patriarch.
Mhm.
What is that?
The ecumenical patriarch is a fancy name given to the bishop who sits in what used to be called Constantinople and is now Istanbul. He was the equivalent to our Metropolitan Tikon of the OCA, meaning that he sat at the head of the table to call meetings and ask people to vote on stuff. Back in the day of the Eastern Roman Empire, in modern days, his territory has been pretty dramatically reduced. But, like I said, if there's ever a question of who would be given jurisdiction of a particular area, then it would fall under his jurisdiction.
So still one vote.
Yep.
However, this bishop is from which does he which I guess I don't even know how to ask. Like, he's not part of the OCA.
Correct.
Which
His own. So, here in America, the Antiochian and the Greek churches are under him.
It's kind of similar question.
Yeah.
So Saint Tikon, he's
Yes.
the bishop of his jurisdiction, Washington, D.C. area, right?
Saint Tikon?
Or metropolitan.
Okay. Yes.
Metropolitan.
Those are different people. So,
Okay.
Yes.
That's his name.
yes.
So he's the bishop of Washington, D.C.
Yes.
Right? Right?
Yes.
But then I know he's not the bishop of all North America. but
Correct.
He's held a little higher.
Half step up. So to give a very practical example, he cannot make demands in this diocese. This diocese is under Bishop Vasily. Bishop Vasily is the only one that can decide what happens here. But it's not uncommon for Metropolitan Tikon to request that things are done in a particular way, so it's standard across the U.S. So one rather boring practical example is that Metropolitan Tikon has asked that priests wear the cuffs anytime they're wearing the stole. Our bishop could say don't do that if he didn't want us to, but there's no really good reason not to, and so most people do that.
So the title metropolitan, that only goes to him. It's the clergy being
In our way of doing things, yes. Remember, you're talking about a 2,000-year-old institution that's spread over all the world, so there's going to be some variation in what they're doing in Antioch and what they're doing in Alexandria and what they're doing in Europe and what they're doing in Russia and what they're doing here. So,
Is that a vote also?
so each synod is usually kind of the end. So the bishops in Russia would not get a vote over here in the OCA. If we did an ecumenical council where everyone got together to talk about stuff, which we haven't had a reason to do for a long time, it's not that we can't, like some people try and claim, it's just that there isn't really any reason to. But if we did want to, then sure, all the bishops present would have, no matter their rank, would have one vote. in the synod of the OCA, a rogue bishop from Serbia can't just come over and place a vote. He's got his own synod and local kind of area that he's a part of, and no one over here would really care what he had to say. Make sense?
So there are multiple dioceses in the OCA?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, there's a few on the East Coast. The South is the other really big one. The West, Midwest. I think Canada has maybe, I don't remember how many in Mexico.
And how many jurisdictions are there?
Almost as many as there are churches elsewhere. So, Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, Rokor, which is Russia, Greece, Antioch, Georgia, the country. I'm probably blanking on several others, but Ukraine.
Since the 4 or 5 patriarchs split.
Yeah, the Pentarchy was just a reality of that time.
Okay.
There were 5 regions. We've added many other regions now.
Because Russia has Moscow now, too, has Moscow separate.
Yeah, 'cause I'm thinking like.
At different points in time, sure, yeah. No. Just, I mean, remember I gave the example before of the states in the U.S., right?
Yeah.
If some, state congressperson from one state went over to another one and tried to vote, they'd go, what are you doing? Go back to your place. Is any one of them higher than others? I mean, I don't know, maybe some of the older ones are given a little more precedence than the newer ones, but in reality, not really any difference. No one looks at Pennsylvania for being one of the founding states and whatever Pennsylvania says we all have to do, right? No one cares.
Does a priest request to become a bishop, or does it?
You don't have a request.
You don't request.
No. If you do, the answer is almost certainly no. Real quick. Yes. You are told. You can say no, but you are told that this is a thing we're going to do. Would you like it to not happen?
But that doesn't necessarily happen with the priesthood.
Yeah.
Oh, same.
All of the ranks. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's usually, I mean, I say that. It is usually somewhat of a conversation. But officially speaking, it always has to go the person being requested and them saying yes. Sometimes you can say, hey, I would like you to ask me. Don't have to.
Is that like so that pride doesn't get in the way?
Yes. Yeah, it really just comes down to pride. Yep. Trying to just make sure that the people that are there for the right reasons, and not just because they've decided that this is a good thing for them. Not that there aren't those that are still prideful in the clergy. Please don't think that being a clergyman makes you somehow different or unique from everyone else. I will be the first to tell you that we're not really that different. I just dress a little differently, but still have a lot of the same struggles everyone else does. But yeah. All right. Well, now we're pretty well over time, so feel free to reach out if you've got other questions, or find me before or after services, or whatever. As always, you've got my email and whatnot, so reach out if there's anything else. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That cleared a lot of things.
Those from